Imagine a shoe designed for warriors, workers and farmers. One built for agility, grip and balance. A shoe so practical that it's still worn today by construction workers and highly specialized tradesmen. But somehow it also became a symbol of avant-garde fashion. One of the most polarizing and recognizable pieces in TikTok fashion that can be spotted anywhere from Soho House to a local small plates natural wine bar. So how did it make the leap from workwear to a popular but polarizing high fashion statement? And more importantly, why would anyone design a shoe with a split toe in the first place? First, let's set some things straight. Tabis were initially socks. The first Tabi-like garment dates back to the Heian period, although they did not have a split toe design initially. Another shoe that was popular during the time was the warangi. These were tie-on sandals, often made from straw, worn by common people for work and prolonged labor. And these warangis then evolved into the soris and getas. These became especially popular during the Edo period, where Japan's vibrant merchant and artisan classes emerged. And to wear these, you had to have socks that have a split toe, and this is what is known today as a tabi. Over time, the socks evolved to be made out of more durable materials like leather, which then were called jika-tabi, which literally translates into a sock that touches the ground. And again later, the company Bridgestone, yes, the ones with the tires, started to make jika-tabis with a rubber sole. And they are still popular today as workwear in manual labor jobs, like you will often find them with rickshaw drivers, gardeners, but also construction workers. And there are even steel-cap versions of the tabi, and also workwear versions with spikes are a thing. So you see, something that has been a sock worn by nobles, merchants and artisans has then evolved to become a workwear staple. But how did the tabi make its way into high fashion? This guy is responsible for that. Let's jump into the year 1988. A Belgian fashion designer, Margiela, discovered the tabi during a trip to Japan and started to incorporate the design into his own creations. He took the split toe design from the tabis in the East and combined it with a typical boot from the West. At least this is my interpretation of the design. Margiela himself says that he wanted to have an invisible shoe, one that gave off the illusion of a barefoot standing in a chunky high heel. And so he introduced his version of a Tabi boot to the public during a fashion show in 1988. Here the models were wearing the shoes, but the soles had red paint on them. So when walking over the white floor of the showroom, they left split-toed marks on the floor, similar to hoofs. And from there the shoe took the world in a swoop. And there you go, you have fashion's most polarizing shoe for the next 30 years, at least until this bad boy came around. And as popular as they are today, as polarizing they are. I mean, they are super popular with fashionistas, and fashion TikTok is completely full of them. I mean, personally, I love the memes about posh London natural wine bars involving these shoes. And all of these memes show that the shoe has become a status symbol for knowledgeable but also insufferable fashion people. Like, these shoes have a certain if you know allure to them. At the same time, the weird look is very polarizing. But what put the shoe into this very interesting sweet spot of popularity but also polarization? Maybe it has something to do with the shoe's origin being Japanese. And isn't everything that is Japanese much more cooler than the Western version of it? But wait, I'm not implying that everyone who sees those shoes immediately knows that they are Japanese. But I think we can agree that to the Western eye, these shoes look very odd and weird. And you get weird connotations of maybe hoofs and ninjas. And I would say that this reaction of something being weird and odd to the Western eye is something that we get a lot with Japanese things. I mean, if it's weird and odd, it provokes an emotional reaction. And that happens a lot with Japanese things like food, or the wide fit of typical Western clothing, or these things. And there is even a term for this fascination with Japanese things. It's called Japanism. And you might think that this fascination or emotional reaction to Japanese culture is something new, something that came up with the internet or the rise of anime and Pokemon. Here's where you're wrong. The term Japanisme is actually French, and it was first described by a French art critic in 1872. The term refers to the popularity and the influence of Japanese art and design onto the Western world after 1853. But what actually happened that year that led to Japanese influences hit the West like a bomb? The forced reopening of Japanese borders. You see, in 1636, the shogunate that was ruling at the time closed down the borders and started an isolationist foreign policy. So foreign nationals were banned from entering the country, common people were kept inside the country, and trade and foreign relations were heavily limited. And this policy lasted until 1853. This means Japan had the possibility to evolve its own culture, but also its own design language without any external influence for nearly 200 years. At the same time, this means that the West hasn't seen a lot of Japan's art for nearly 200 years, especially during a time of growing trade relations and an onset of the industrialization. So the policy ended in 1853 when the American Perry expedition forced the opening of the borders to American trade. And after that, Japanese art, design and fashion hit the West like a brick, which then led to the French art critic to coin the term Japonisme. And we still see today the fascination of the West with odd and foreign design from the East. So is Japanism the only reason why the Tabi is so popular and polarizing in today's fashion? I don't think so, because most people wouldn't even know that the origin of the Margiela Tabi is Japanese. But what most people probably notice is that the look is very foreign and odd to the Westerner's eye, which has its root in Japan. Furthermore, I think the shoe hits a very sweet spot of something that we know and that we like a leather boot, and something that is fascinating because it's odd and foreign to us. And this triggers a fascination with people that want something different, but also disgust with people that don't want anything out of the ordinary. And I can also see this happening with other examples of Japanism. For example, the Japanese workwear pants, the Tobi pants. These are pants that are worn mostly by Japanese construction workers that have now a spotlight with Western fashion enjoyers. And they too hit a very similar sweet spot in my eyes. Like, they look similar enough to something that we in the West always loved, like ninja movies. At the same time, they look weird and foreign enough with normal streetwear. The difference here is that no high fashion designer grabbed onto these and made them popular with natural wine drinking yuppies. At least not yet. During my research for this video, I was very surprised to find out that Japanism was actually a thing from the past. So if you like those type of stories about fashion history and design, you should probably check out one of my other videos. You will definitely love them.